it's in everyone's best interest that we hope, no banks are in trouble. we hope
Sure.
We hope that everyone keeps moving along.
Right.
But unfortunately, the reality probably is that there are some that are in trouble and that there's some that are in great position to, to do really well through this. I would imagine, especially as we get some more stability in the markets, that doesn't necessarily, I think everyone defines stability different, but we were close, right? A month ago, we were close to understanding the direction of the Fed. But as we get some more stability one way or another, right, I think that's when you'll probably see some, if I had to guess, some bank consolidation.
All right. Chris Roach, how are you doing today, buddy?
Can't complain. No complaints yet, but no, I'm doing well. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming in today. I think this is going to be a fun conversation, and a lot of folks are going to want to tune in and listen to what you have to say, because one of the most biggest topics, especially in the commercial real estate world, is kind of debt maturity, and that's kind of the world you live in a lot in terms of the valuation world, and so I'm excited to kind of dive into that a little bit in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's front of mind for everybody, and that is the world that we're in, and that's what everybody's talking about, right?
Yeah.
This wave of maturities that continues to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it sure does. I don't think we can solve the national debt problem here in the country, but we'll at least talk.
How long do we have?
We'll at least talk a little bit about the commercial real estate sector and the debt. But before we get going and talking about BBG and all the stuff that you do over there, we've known each other for a little while. We obviously have a couple commonalities. We both are Texas Tech Red Raiders, and then we both spent some time in lovely Rockwall County. You spent that time earlier in your life, and I'd love to dig in a little bit kind of on your upbringing and how you got to where you are today, bud.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it relatively brief and compact, but actually I grew up, born and raised in Lubbock.
Okay, that's right.
So my dad was in the Air Force. There was an old Reese Air Force base that's since been closed down and repurposed out there. But so started in Lubbock. Yeah, lived there until about middle school, and then that's when I moved out to the Rockwall area. Yeah, from there, and so then right when I graduated, got back out to Lubbock.
Had to want to get back out to West Texas. You had to get back out to West Texas again.
Yeah, no, I always tell everybody, especially with parents that are about to send their kids out there, and as you know, it's like Lubbock will take care of the students, right? They'll take care of your kids. It's a great spot to go to school. As far as staying in the real estate business, there's a lot of people done really well, but wanted to get back to the DFW, right, the bigger market, and to get into doing what I wanted to do, which was real estate.
Yeah, so, that's probably been a pretty good path for you so far. Yeah, it was pretty good.
So far, so good. But I love getting back to Lubbock and staying involved in the school. And
no doubt about it. When we talk about, anytime I talk about Lubbock, the first thing is always just the people. Yeah, that are so great out there. I think that's why there's people there, and why they continue to stay, and you're seeing some pretty good growth out in West Texas. It's not like DFW, but there's a reason why those folks are out there. So you were born out in Lubbock, moved here in the middle school. Who would you say, kind of growing up, or some people that had pretty big impact on your life, Chris?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and you hate to answer that question immediately, feeling like, okay, I'm gonna leave somebody out here, but probably one of the biggest would be my uncle David English, who is a big reason, probably the reason why I'm in commercial real estate. Wow. And even why I'm in the section of real estate that I'm in with the valuation services and all the other services that we offer. From early on, we spent a lot of time together as I was growing up, right? A lot of hunting and a lot of doing all kinds of stuff. But he was always an anchor for me, kind of, I'd go about my way, right, side to side, and he'd kind of give me that true north. And as I was getting ready to graduate, he knew, hey, I want to be in real estate, and really went out of his way to make a lot of connections for me. Give me an opportunity to meet with a lot of people. His goal for me was really, he's not setting up interviews necessarily to get me a job. It was more about, hey, you need to understand, like, there's a lot of different jobs in real estate, especially commercial real estate. And in school, they're going to teach you the blocking, the tackling of real estate as a whole. But what do you do on a day-to-day basis? That was kind of the mission. And so as I was wrapping up my last semester or two, he did a lot of amazing things for me to be able to meet a lot of people and say, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Like, what does title look like? What does brokerage look like? What is your development? Tell me, a little bit about that. So I learned a lot in a short period of time. And through that, a lot of people kept pointing me back to Valuation, as almost a graduate school in real estate, right? Why don't you go spend a couple years there? Through some of those meetings, I'd met David Berger, who David and Diane Butler were partners in what was Butler Berger. So long story short on that, ended up getting an opportunity to work with them. Coming out of school at the end of 2001. And so have been
started out just as a lowly appraiser, right? Just doing
lowly analyst. I mean, it was I was delivering a lot of reports and met a lot of clients through just literally hand delivering reports and making calls, meeting a lot of brokers that way. So there was a lot of learning that went on for those first couple of years.
That's awesome to hear about David and how he kind of shaped your passion towards commercial real estate. What was your mom and dad's background? Tell me, growing up, tell me about them.
So my mom was always as a school teacher. So she also writes music. So she writes gospel music. She's got some songs in the hymnal and some things like that. So music is always a passion there, but also was either a music teacher. Later in her career, became a counselor and was always in school districts along the way. My dad was actually, after the Air Force, got into multifamily property management. And so he was in real estate. He's recently retired, but now they keep trying to pull him back in to do some, consulting things and, as people are looking at deals, but had a long career in multifamily property management and really did a great job with that. And so, kind of got a little bit of an eye on all kinds of growing up there with some of the things he was doing.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to mom and the music. So did she push music on you? Did you play the piano growing up, or do you know any instruments? I mean, was music a big part of your life a little bit?
It was a big part of my life, being that she was who she was and still is with music. And so, I spent a lot of time, even when she was performing and things like that. I dabbled in it a little bit. It really wasn't a passion for me. I enjoy it and I still enjoy music, but it just wasn't something that I was going to necessarily pursue. But my sister did, went to school for music. I've got 3 daughters now. Every single one of them spends a lot of time in some capacity in music, right? Whether it's playing the piano or choir or musical theater. So music is definitely a big part of the family.
Yeah, that's it. It's just interesting because I think you're either born with that musical ear or you're not. And I was not born with the musical ear, but my daughter loves music, singing, piano. That's her whole passion. And I just think you're born with that type of passion. And so my mom is kind of similar to, sounds like your mom a little bit, not to the same degree, but sang in church choir, did solos, all those things. And I think that's just kind of born. It's just part of your DNA, and it's interesting. Those artistic people, sometimes they make it in the business world. There's some exceptions, but the most part, they kind of carve their own different path, Yeah.
No, I even had a chance to have my oldest daughter and my mom sang together at Lake Point Baptist Church out in Rockwall, big church out there for their 40th anniversary.
Oh wow!
I want to say it was even on Mother's Day. This is just a few years ago, but that was a pretty cool to kind of see it come full circle to have those two sing together on a song.
Yeah, so, I've been in that arena. You could almost call it. That's a big stage right there.
Yeah, it's quite the quite the facility. That was the old Church on the Rock when I was in Rockwall. That's what it was called. Yeah, when it was originally built, it's called Church on the Rock, and we went to Lake Point, and it was out actually in Rowlett. So it was on 66 and Dow Rock. Yeah, is where the original Lake Point was. So
that's awesome.
Kind of changed up over there.
Yeah, when you were little, growing up, I mean, you obviously found your path into commercial real estate. But what did you want to be when you were a kid? Did you have any idea? Like,
I kind of jumped around a lot. I think everyone at one point, and I probably, I jumped around as a young kid to, I want to be a doctor for no obvious reason. I want to be a vet. I want to be a, whatever it was. But as I got older, like a true, like this is what I wanted to do. Yeah. Probably the only thing outside of real estate was sports agent. So I, at one point, even in college, was wanting to move and go ahead and move into law school after college and then pursue that path. Still would have probably loved to have done that. That would have been a cool experience. Totally different lifestyle for me. But that was about the only thing that I probably took seriously that could be an alternative to jumping right into commercial real estate.
Yeah. I had those same thoughts too. You know? I mean, you and I think probably part of it is like the movie Jerry Maguire, right? It's just so incredible. And I had a huge passion for sports growing up. And then, kind of once your sports career ends, you're like, how do I stay involved in sports? Oh, right. I'll be a sports agent. And then you realize, I got to go to law school, 3 more years. And then you really start digging into it and you're like, boy, this is a small niche.
Oh yeah.
Small niche, and it's kind of who to kind of break into that path. But yeah, that's interesting. Well, cool. Well, thanks for sharing that with the audience. That was awesome. What? So let's talk about BBG a little bit. Tell me, just tell the audience kind of high level, kind of what you guys do, and let's talk a little bit kind of. You've had an interesting career where you've been at BBG your whole career, or
that's right.
And
in some form or another,
in some form or another. And here you are standing here today, and now you're the CEO of one of the largest valuation companies in America. Pretty cool.
It's been a rewarding but very interesting path to get there too.
I'm sure
we've had a lot of I don't want to go through the whole history because it's not that interesting, but from Butler Burger, the original group, there was an acquisition by Land America at one point in 2007. That Land America as a the large at one point, Fortune 500 business through the Great Recession ended up going bankrupt actually like shortly after the acquisition. So our small little valuation group within that was still a strong business that had a lot of growth opportunities, and we wanted to keep doing what we were doing. So we actually bought it out of bankruptcy, right? And then moved it back into a private business and just continued to go down that path. We always felt like we had something as far as what we wanted to do with the valuation industry. We felt like that opportunity was worth it and stuck with it. And we had a, kind of a mission and a goal in mind and just kind of kept pursuing it. It's been a lot of fun, but it's been an interesting ride. We got lucky along the way, which always helps. But we've ended up growing to where we are today. Partnered with a few private equity firms along the way, which certainly I think can help and expedite some growth.
That's right.
So yeah, it's been a good
run. Cash injection always helps, right?
Right, playing with somebody else's money,
That's right.
No, it helped us do a lot of our strategy, and our business has been consolidate a very fragmented value, especially on the valuation side, a very fragmented appraisal market. And to do that, you can do it one of two ways. There's been a few businesses that have done it via franchise network, right? And then we did it through acquisition. So and to really help put a little fuel on the fire, private equity kind of co-investment with us has been a home run, really. It's been a great opportunity to be able to take down some really talented businesses and bring them in under the fold and really integrate those and meet a lot of good people along the way.
Well, let's talk about that journey. You graduate from Texas Tech. You get your first job as you're opening up a lot of Excel spreadsheets, right? Doing a lot of analyst work. did you ever think that, you would go from analyst to CEO of this organization when you got started?
No, the plan was 2 years tops. The plan, and nothing against the Valuation group, or certainly not against the business itself. I enjoyed working with the team and loved the people I worked with and the business we were in, and our clients obviously. But the plan was to learn commercial real estate value and really all the property types at once. Like that was the real pull for me. Is like, wow, instead of going to work for a multifamily developer or broker or this specific sector, it was like I can get exposure to really all of
everything.
them. Understand which one I'm kind of pulled towards, and then go do something a little bit more sexy. Make the real money. Do the brokerage or development or mortgage break. Something else.
Yep. Sure.
And just kept getting pulled back in, and really when I say pulled back in, it was just this opportunity in our business. We have CBRE is the largest appraisal firm in the country, and on the commercial side, and last time I checked, and I'm throwing out rough numbers here, but they have about a 7% market share, give or take.
Okay.
And so you can just tell, right? There's a significant opportunity for for consolidation in that market. And really the top, of the top, call it 5 businesses in the country, we're the only ones that aren't affiliated with brokerage or have their own lending platform. And so
right.
Personally, I kind of felt like that was an opportunity, right? There's no conflict of interest. There's no extra step to make sure, you didn't have an ancillary service that was involved in this transaction.
Right.
And then there's the business model, really. We just did it differently, right? Obviously nothing's wrong with the CB model. They've been very successful in it, but it also was set up more similar to brokerage, which is more geographically constrained. And then the other groups kind of just reinvented that same model.
Right.
We kind of did it from a small business and did what works for us and mainly our clients. And it's just a slightly different model. And I think it's really lent itself to be successful in driving more and more opportunities, growing wallet share with our existing clients kind of across a national platform, but then also adding these other services.
Yeah.
When someone hangs up the phone with an appraiser, they turn around and call environmental specialists, they call a PE on the engineering side. They're calling all these other ones. It's like there's a full-time job at most mortgage bankers or lenders to order all these services. So we try to create that, that easy button.
Yeah. So when you started at BBG, how big of a company was it? How many offices? And talk about a little bit about the growth you guys have had over the years, and a little bit about your journey.
So when I first started, we had it was the Dallas office. We had about 20 people in the Dallas office.
Okay.
We had 2 down in Austin.
Yep.
And I think we were just about to open. The Houston office kind of came and went a couple times with one person up there. So,
gotcha.
So pretty much a Dallas group with some, kind of satellite offices. And it was a nice sized Dallas group, honestly.
Yeah.
For appraisal, I mean, it was one of the larger Dallas offices. They'd been very successful at working with really institutional clients, which was kind of unheard of for local groups. Most of those went to the larger firms.
Yeah.
Dave and Diane had also created some nice technology, which was more competitive with the national groups, which was unique, right? There was a lot of groups that, were basically working with, basically typewriters, but with computers. I mean, it was just Word documents that they were, regurgitating. And so there was a database set up and some things that were kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And so from there, to kind of fast forward it to now, we have 47 offices.
Wow.
And it's grown a lot, but there's somewhere around, probably office, mid-20s is when we really hit that critical size where we could go to the larger lending institutions, the larger groups, and say, we're the easy button in this region, but now we can actually support you across the country, right? We have boots on the grounds in every region. We have MAIs in every state license, those kind of things. And that's really what I think helped take off on the overall growth trajectory that we're seeing now.
How many employees total now?
We are about mid 700s.
Wow.
So, and that, it's
from 20 to 700.
It's pretty wild when you think about it. And that's one thing. It's good news, bad news, right? Good news is we're growing and we got a lot more people. The bad news is my favorite part about growing was I knew everybody. I got to spend a lot of time with everybody.
Right.
And now, I try to get out to an office every 2 weeks at least.
Right.
And it's you can't keep up, right? You got new faces and there's the dreaded, when you go to an office and you may have met them, a year ago real quickly in passing and you don't know those things. I like to know, what they're about personally, what the family's about. And it's just, it's very tough to keep up with some of that. And it's still important, but it's challenging. And so that's the flip side of growing like that. So.
For sure. One thing I heard about Roger Staubach back in the day was just he had a knack for knowing everybody's name, and they were very similar to you guys. They went from just a small little office to a huge, player across North America with probably about the same amount of folks and offices that But I've always heard that he knew everybody's name, and that's one of the cool things that I think a leader of an organization you've got to do. That's what it's all about. Do you have any secret tips for how you try to memorize folks' names out there?
I'm not good at it. That's the problem. I was hoping you'd have a tip or something that you've heard. It sounds like maybe Roger's the guy to talk to.
I'm not the best at that either. That's one of my flaws. I've tried to get better at it over the years. Like what I'll try to do if I meet somebody and I know I'm going to need to talk to them again, I'll just in my head repeat their name like 5 times after I shake their hand, right? And then I usually can either associate that name with another word or something like that, and that's how I memorize it.
There has to be an effort in there somewhere. I mean, it's work.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes LinkedIn's helped a lot.
Yeah.
Where you can look at rosters, look at faces, and try to bridge the gap. But yeah, it's definitely something I try to work on, and definitely something I need to work on more.
Yeah. So let's talk about BBG right now, and the hot topic across really all commercial sectors is debt maturity right now, and you guys work with a tremendous amount of major lenders across the country. Let's just kind of jump right in of what are you seeing out there? What are these banks doing? And what do you see happening?
Yeah, no, that's the question, right? That's what everyone's wanting to know. That's the interesting part of our world is that we just get to see a lot, right? There's, especially on the valuation side, there's a variety of reasons why you would get an appraisal, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a function of asset management wanting to know what the value is.
Yep.
Sometimes it's estate planning. Sometimes it's partnership disputes and other more legal matters. It's REO work. So as the banks are moving on something, it's pre-foreclosure work. There's a lot of it. And so the cool thing about, I think the way we look at it, and shocking, right? With private equity, they love data, and so do we now. And so we track everything. And so we do track the demand drivers for why did we get an order, right? Why did we get this appraisal, right? The days of assuming that it was for a refinance or an acquisition is out the window. And it's really not that interesting, right? We want to know why are they doing this and what's the trend line of that look like? And so one trend we have seen is what we'll call kind of the distress bucket. Which is it's pre-foreclosure, it's REO, they've ordered a liquidation value, special servicing is involved, or ordering the appraisal valuation. So all of those kind of fall into one bucket that we kind of call distressed, right? And so we highlight that, right? It comes out on a daily basis. It's consolidated on a monthly, it's analyzed quarterly. We're constantly evaluating what's that look like real time. And we'll also look at canceled or on hold jobs. You'll see that kind of jump around when the 10-year spikes and things like that. But I have seen, we've kind of seen it basically about double the distressed work since the end of the year to now. So the first quarter has had a lot of that. And I think some of it is, it's kicking the can down the road as far as you can. And then it's time to start working through some of that, the things that just aren't going to, they're not going to bring more cash to the table.
That's right.
Or the deal just doesn't work and the maturity's there, or, if the promote's gone and they've thrown the keys in, there's a lot of reasons, but we're coming to the point in the market where across the country, we are seeing a step up in that. As far as,
do you think that the last, let's just start from kind of when the interest rate hikes happened, right? You think from that point to call it the end of last year, all these lenders for the most part were just, in simple man terms, trying to work out deals with these guys if their debt was maturing, and they just kind of kept extending, or trying to work or trying to help with one another. And now they're finally getting to the point of saying, we're going to have to just take the keys back, or we're going to have to, liquidate this asset, or the bank's going to take it back. You're right. I mean,
that's right. As far as how the lenders specifically behind the doors are thinking through it, obviously, I have no idea, but I will say from what we saw, we talked to a lot of lenders along the way last year. We expected, in 08, 9, 10, 11, and we were very busy. I can tell you, very different world, right? And last year, we were busy, but we didn't see the extensions because they were short-term extensions, right? There's not an appraisal required for most lenders at a 6 or 12-month extension. And so I think it was a lot of extending these deals, working through them in hopes that, we're in a more favorable interest rate environment soon.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I'm sure everyone saw it's like the NBA revises their forecast of, just in November or October, it's like, 2024 has a wall of maturities that's, 600 billion, right? And then all of a sudden at the end of the year, they're like, never mind, everything was extended that was supposed to be at the back half of 23. So now 24 looks like closer to a trillion. And then after the fourth quarter, they're like, not many of those deals got done. So I'm just waiting for a new number of what's left. And so even if you look at, hey, we're going to have to work through half of these, we'll extend half, and I'm just throwing out, you still, that's a even 500 billion is a big year as far as maturities that just things finally need to get done, right? There, you can only move it so far. And so I think we did see that. We saw a lot of the extensions and just weren't really involved in that process along the way. I go around and meet with a lot of our clients around the country on the bank side, and a lot of them, especially in the first quarter, have said, look, we were basically not doing anything. We were closed for real estate loans for the, for lack of a better term, in the fourth quarter. Like we just weren't going to do anything. We kind of went pencils down. And then they said, starting in January, like we've got quotas and budgets like everybody else. And it's a tough environment and rates are high, but like we're open for business. We're looking for deals. And so I think it's a combination of a few things that you're seeing that wall of maturities that we're just, it's inevitable. There's going to be things that are happening. And there's just a lot more lenders that are like, okay, we're comfortable about this space. We're ready to move. We're ready to look at these deals. Now their requirements may be, too much for some to handle, but I do think that they're out there and they're active, and it's a different world than we were in at the end of the year last year.
Well, as you know, capital can only sit idle for so long. People can only sit there and twiddle their thumbs and fake looking at underwriting. I mean, you got to put deals into play,
right?
And so it feels like from a capital perspective that 24, that the market wants to get back going again from a lending, placing capital, getting developments going again. But at the end of the day, we got this debt maturity. So we got kind of the yin and the yang going on right now, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that plays out over the next year. Of all that, doubling the amount that's in that distress bucket, how would you, ballpark asset class type that's in that bucket? It's got to be heavy office.
Right, I was about to say, why don't you guess?
B, C offices have got to be a ton of it. Yeah. There's got to be some multifamily sprinkled in there. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing from an asset class perspective.
Yeah, office is the majority of it, really. And so you're seeing there's suburban office.
Yep.
There's also downtown office. When you look outside of Dallas and Texas, and you really get that large overview, there's a lot of markets where downtown is in trouble, right? There's a lot of, we're working on a deal, I'll just call it in the Southeast, that's, two different deals actually, $1 million+ square foot office and $2 million+ square foot office, where, leases were at one point somewhat recently, right over the last few years, at, $30 a square foot,
right?
Triple net type stuff. And now we're, they had a recent deal at 8. It's just to try to get people into some of this, and it's in special servicing, and there's some really painful deals downtown in New York and Manhattan. It's the have and have nots, right? The Class A space is a different world, but there's a lot of stuff that's just, it's one land value deal after another that some of these smaller, more boutique office deals are going for. So office is going to be, continue to it's going to struggle, right? Because I do think there's been the largest drops in value. So you add higher insurance, higher operating expenses, higher cap rates, obviously, lowered rents, higher vacancies. They're hitting it from every angle. And it's going to continue to be a pain point there. So that's the large one. I think there's some multifamily pain. Yeah. When you start seeing, in a lot of markets, that's more of a market by market situation, but we are seeing some multifamily trickle in there. And again, some of the same types of things. They're getting hit from a lot of higher expenses. Rent growth either slowed or kind of going back the other direction, and then the cap rates. But really, those are the majority of them. There is some broken to subdivisions and unfinished lot type developments that are sitting in servicing, but nothing like we saw 09, 10.
Yeah.
I think you obviously know the industrial world, but we're not seeing that stuff at this point. Maybe there's a little bit of slowing in some of the rent growth, but it's nothing we're not seeing any of that product yet. Yeah. And then retail, I think retail's kind of a shining light on this whole thing, because they never really jumped up with everybody else. When the property values were going crazy, retail kind of had a black eye through some of that, and so the pricing was pretty favorable. And I think I've seen a lot of really neat opportunities in retail and shopping centers that are getting done, where a lot of the acquisitions we're doing are in that space, and it's really a healthy product type for the most part that we've seen.
Well, the retail got hit with the e-commerce industrial world, so everybody quit building power centers, right? So when you quit building for a long time, you're going to finally fill up that vacancy, especially in, let's call it the Sunbelt markets, where you're seeing population growth, right?
Sure.
Now, some other areas of the country probably going to be hit a little bit harder in that sector. What about shopping malls, like your good old Galleria that's right downstairs? Are y'all seeing any shopping malls across the country that are struggling? I know that's not a huge asset class because there's only a few in every city.
Yeah, we're not working on a lot of them right now. The main ones we've worked on really over the last few years have been redevelopments.
Yeah.
They've either been, you take part of it and you're breaking it into something different.
Yep.
You're turning it in. I've even seen some in some major areas that have turned into more, kind of medical office and medical type deals on a portion of it. And they're just, maybe some kind of mixed use piece.
Yep.
You got the pickleball craze is taking over some big spots in shopping centers and things like that. But we're not working on a lot of that. Yeah. I think a lot of it's just kind of sitting there because most of the folks that are owning that right now either have owned it for a while, and it's either that or acquired it, based on a big opportunistic play when e-commerce killed them all. So it's just not a world we're real active in right now. But
it's interesting, there's in DFW, we got an anomaly. You got North Park and you got Stonebriar up there in Frisco that are just crushing it,
right?
And then every other mall here in town is struggling, you know, and these guys are going to have to get creative eventually. And, I look at the Galleria, what it looks like today versus 20 years ago when I used to office in one tower over. Man, it's completely different,
Absolutely.
I mean, the amount of sheetrock storefronts down there is frightening.
Right.
So I'm glad I'm not in the mall business. Let's just put it that way.
I agree.
Me
too.
So shifting to banks, are there some banks that are in trouble?
I think so. I mean, I think all banks had a much larger allocation of commercial real estate than, whether that's because pricing was higher, they made more deals. I mean, it was over the last few years, right? That allocation mix, I think, I don't want to say that it was outside of their comfort zone. Obviously, each bank's different. And they know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing those and making individual decisions that, drive their goals. But I do think it was a larger asset class for them than what they previously had, right? That's the only thing I know. And so because of that, when you do see, I think, where probably underlying values sit relative to where some of these maturities are coming up, they certainly could be. We have, we did a lot of work for the FDIC during the previous, Great Recession days. As they would close down banks, some of the asset management for the FDIC would come to us and we'd do, they just basically give us a list of all the really bank-owned assets. So headquarters, bank branches, REO stuff, and we just work our way through those on the valuation side. We've had discussions with those groups to be prepared on certain things. Signature Bank was a large client of ours for a long time out of our New York office. We've worked on some of those assets, after the fact and things like that are happening. But at this point, it's anyone's guess, right? Which banks are in trouble and what that looks like. I mean, certainly it's in everyone's best interest that we hope, no banks are in trouble. We hope that everyone keeps moving along.
Right.
But unfortunately, the reality probably is that there are some that are in trouble and that there's some that are in great position to to do really well through this.
And so breaking that down, would you kind of pinpoint it's probably a few regional banks that'll probably get maybe acquired by some of the big, the big players like the JP Morgan Chases, Bank of America, to gain additional market share? You think that's probably what you'll see?
I would imagine, especially as we get some more stability in the markets. That doesn't necessarily, I think everyone defines stability different, but just a little bit. We were close, right? A month ago, we were close to understanding the direction of the Fed. But as we get some more stability one way or another, right? I think that's when you'll probably see some, if I had to guess, some bank consolidation. We've been talking about it for 18 months now, but it's got to get to the point where you can't kick the can any longer down the road. It's been pretty surprising. If you'd asked me right when they started talking about inflation and moving rates up, and if you'd have said, okay, how long do you think this lasts? I mean, I don't know anybody that would have been right on that guess. I mean, we're in a world, really over the last 10, even 15 years, we move in and out of cycles relatively quick, whether it's the age of the internet or data or whatever your reasoning is. Cycles are, they feel tighter, they feel shorter, more steep. And I mean, we've been stuck in the mud, right? As a real estate industry in banking for a very long time.
2-3 years now. Yeah, I know. It's been, we've certainly been stuck in neutral, to say the least. So when you think about this situation where we're at today, all you can do is live off your kind of past experiences. What do you think we're in for something close of what we experienced in 08, 09, or do you think it's, where do you see this thing playing out from the debt maturity perspective?
That's a good question. I wish I had just a solid answer for that. And I wish I was 100% confident behind that answer.
Sure. No, I know.
Yeah, it's like
this is the hardest answer in real estate. It really is.
Right. I don't think we're going to see the really catastrophic. I mean, it was pretty bad back then, right? I mean, it was
across all asset classes.
That's exactly right. Everything was impacted, all markets, credit freeze. Basically, I don't think there was nearly the equity that's in play in today's world.
Right.
We have an underlying very, from what it feels like, you got a very healthy still economy, right? That's kind of part of the problem, right? They're trying to slow it down enough to create some, at least less inflation. But so because of that, I don't think we're going to get into a really bad market necessarily. I think we have been taking some licks, and they may not be kind of out for observation quite yet, right? Everyone's not seeing some of the underlying value,
right?
Diminution that's out there. So there is some pain that'll continue to kind of come out that's already been impacted, but if we're working with some groups right now that are getting pretty aggressive and getting geared up to look at doing some acquisitions. They feel like they're somewhat near the bottom, right? Blackstone with their big acquisition, they're looking at. Everyone's like, okay, well, if they're doing it, right, or is this the bottom? Or are we kind of going to start following suit? And I think there's a lot of areas around the country and sectors in real estate that you could argue like this is probably a pretty good time period.
Yep.
I'd love to get just a little bit more certainty on this inflation, right? The last couple of weeks has shook just enough that it's making people wonder, where are we at? Do they have to, God forbid, do they have to
raise
them one more time to see if they can't put this thing out? And so if we could just get a little bit more, I think you will start to see that it feels like the bottom, and it does feel like people, and as we move out of it, you're still going to have pain that's going to surface. And I think that's where people are going to have to, that's where opportunities come from though, too. Sure. I mean, you look around DFW and it's like how many great, very successful businesses, especially in multifamily, were created, during the big downturn.
That's right.
Everyone's got the stories of the courthouse steps and buying these foreclosure deals. And I mean, incredibly impressive, massive businesses have been created from that period to now. And so I think that's what people are waiting for. Is where are the opportunities and when do they start?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines right now, getting ready to pounce. And I believe, like you said, that the bottom, especially on some of these opportunistic opportunities, is, to me, in the next 6 months. I think once the Fed, if they do lower late this year, then you're going to see a feeding frenzy.
Right. Yeah. The second we get one cut,
I know,
and it's not necessarily because the rate's all of a sudden so much lower. It's not going to be a lot, right? It's going to be nominal, but it's more about the fact that the cutting has begun.
That's
it's
right.
Like the stall is over.
Right.
So,
and I think that even extends over into the residential world, right? Which has kind of been really sitting on pause, for a while now. You mentioned technology, and I like to hit on that a little bit because I'm a guy who's always kind of tracking that, and I'm a guy who loves data. And how are you guys embracing AI?
Well, embracing it, I would say we're embracing it purely because we're interested, right? We're interested and we're ready to see how it can impact our business, right? How can we service our clients better? How can we create a better product out of it? How can we create efficiencies? So I think just by being open to it, right, we're embracing it's here. But it's exciting, and there's a lot of different ways we can look at it.
Sure.
We're doing on the valuation side, call it 40,000, commercial appraisals a year, give or take, in any year. And so that's a lot of really interesting data.
Yep.
We do a lot pre-AI on breaking that into searchable information, right? How can we learn from all of these? How can we, talk to people about trends and what we're seeing in values, not just in sales, right? That's the thing. It's like you can get a lot of good information in the market right now from sales transactions, leads transactions, but there's really no trend lines around market values that are out there, right? Because they're obviously in the appraisal. So there's a lot of interesting things we can learn from that. But AI it shortens that, right? As opposed to having to go through and data mine and data science this thing to death. You you can do something as simple as all your appraisals can be in a single file, and there's overlays that you name them.
That's right.
Whether it's Box.com or it's even Adobe has one now. It's like basically ChatGPT for files. It goes through and reads them all, and you can now ask it questions about what's in there.
That's right.
It's, I think the legal world has done a really good job at already living in that space, but it basically has shortened our kind of our build project of learning from our own work and our own work product. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's, I've just started playing around with it here recently, and I mean, my mind was just blown. I mean, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable,
Right.
And, we have such a labor problem already in this country. I think it's going to, it's probably going to be a benefit at the end of the day. I mean, I know everybody's kind of got this idea that AI is going to take over the world and kill us all, right?
Right.
But in all honesty, I think it's a good thing, and, you probably have problems filling analyst roles. Well, now, you can put all this data and AI can kind of spit out a lot of that stuff for you, It's wild.
Yeah, AI is not going to replace the real estate professional, the appraisal professional, the valuation professional, but what it's going to do is make them a lot better, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you're not embracing that and using the tools and the power of it to improve what you're doing, then the lack of embracing it will get you replaced pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could see a very short path for whether it's brokers touring spaces or buyers or appraisers, but touring spaces with their Apple Vision, whatever the iPro Vision, goggles, and having an AI overlay, basically writing up, whether it's an offering memorandum, an appraisal improvement analysis, whatever. But basically, as they're walking around looking at it, it's taking measurements, it's doing everything, and they're just talking through. It's capturing the conversation between the brokers and the owners of the buildings and things like this, and. Yeah, there's just a lot of neat components that I think will just make an improved, higher quality, and more efficient product. Right? We've, the number of appraisers is, we're doing the best we can to grow that space, but the average MAI age is still, I think 63, 64 years old.
Wow.
So I mean, our job in our industry in real estate is really to not slow you guys down, right? It's not to slow down the process. It's to provide the quality information to make to solve the problems and to help make the decisions, but it's to do it in a quick and efficient manner.
Right.
And when we were, in 2022, 2021, there was a lot of buzz around there like, hey, appraisers have got to do this faster than 4 weeks and 5 weeks.
Right.
And because we should be able to do it faster, but it's capacity.
Yep.
And so I think AI is going to help that a lot and help us be able to continue to keep up with the demands of the market and not slow down the transactions. Because if we slow down the transactions, people are going to figure out another way to get this done, right?
That's right.
We need to keep up.
For sure.
So,
incredible journey at BBG. Chris, what would you say proudest moment to date is in business there?
That's a good one too. I think it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's trying to figure out how do we do our part around kind of repopulating this industry, right? How do we create the next generation of appraisers? And I think part of that was when we launched BBGU, from kind of the idea of it to actually pulling it together. We were able to hire. We hired it was 106 new professionals into the industry in 2022 alone. So we were really able to, we were constantly trying to figure out, right, there's only so many appraisers and you can go around and try to recruit from competitors and all these things like everybody else. But how do we really grow our own, and how do we create a long-term path towards building the next generation of appraisers? Our business, it's a younger group, right? The average age, like I mentioned, was up in the 60s. We have about 35% of our MAIs that are actually 40 and under. And so we have a path to really add to what we feel like is a need in the industry. And so I think the vision of BBGU from the beginning to a full year, brought in 106 different people all over the country. That's probably if I had to peg one, that'd be one of the most proud I am of the team to be able to pull that together and have that much success in its kind of first year. So
That's great. Well, and there's a lot of great quality kids coming out of Texas Tech Real Estate Center these days, right?
That's right.
I actually had Professor Harrell here last week.
Oh, that's great.
It's just great things of what he's doing, and I'm sure you'll find some great new appraisers that are coming out of that university and a bunch of others.
We've got quite a few of them.
Yeah,
we brought in quite a few.
So Chris, we're going to close with what I call the C-suite closers. These are just kind of quick hitting questions, for people to get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
Favorite pastime and why?
Favorite pastime? Well, I would probably say I enjoy the most skiing, but I don't get to do it often, right? Because I live in Texas and it's only part-time.
Yeah.
But skiing or tennis.
Skiing or tennis.
And I think tennis is because I can continue to be somewhat competitive in a sport, right? Just the competitive nature, and I get to do something still active, and basketball blows my knees out.
Yeah.
So.
What about pickleball? Are we in the pickleball game at all a little bit, or
no? I mean, I've played it, but it's not my favorite. If I had an hour to burn something, I'm going to go hit the tennis courts versus pickleball at this point.
So I got to introduce you to Trey. So he was an All-American at TCU, played professionally for like 7 years.
Wow.
Y'all should go hit some balls
Well,
together.
no, I'd have to hide in the corner. This is something I picked up later in life, right? So
something that most people wouldn't know about you.
That's a tricky one. Something that most people wouldn't know about me. It would probably get into some very odd jobs that I had from the time I was very young all the way through college. I did just about everything, but one that I really enjoyed is I did start with a friend of mine, a fraternity brother. I started a fence building company in Lubbock.
Wow.
And we would literally just follow the windstorms as they'd come through.
Yep.
We'd go and knock on doors and ask if we could quote it, and we'd get 1 or 2 jobs at a time, go about our business, hanging out, spending some money, and then we'd go back to work when the next windstorm came through. So that was probably not many people would know about the old.
You've dug a few post holes, is what you're saying.
We did.
Boy, that's a job that nobody wants. That's a tough one, man.
Well, we invested some of the money we made on the first one and got a couple augers.
There you go.
We got some work, so we started to learn how to use machines. And we had some help every once in a while with some pledge glasses that would come in and dig a few holes. So,
most impactful book you've read?
That's an even better one. Most impactful book.
Or it can just be your favorite book, just.
Well, I got a lot of favorites. I'm just trying to think as far as most impactful. That's one that's catching me off guard a little bit because I want to be careful on that one because I've got some good ones in mind. Geez, can I pass and circle back on that one?
Yeah, for sure. What does your morning routine look like?
It's pretty hectic with the kiddos, but usually I'm up pretty early.
Yep.
I'd like to say I'm at the gym every morning, but probably 3 to 4 days a week is more realistic.
Yeah,
I try to get back by the time they're scrambling off to school in some capacity, and then I'm at the office. And then unfortunately, a lot of it is traveling. So sometimes that morning routine takes me on the road.
You hit on one of your jobs. What was your first job?
Working with my grandfather. So he had a development outside of Rockwall, still does. It's called Bluebonnet Ridge. It's out near McLennan Chisholm.
Yeah. And
he gave me basically. I spent the whole summer. I think just turned 14, and he said, "All right, we're gonna. It's I think it was about 1,200 acres out there. We're gonna go through and mow." With the double crow wing big tractors, we're going to mow around all the trees and the fences. They can only get so close. So you're basically going to walk around and weed eat around all the trees and the fence posts. And basically that was the job. So go follow through that. By about that time I was done, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they'd mow it again. And I'd go back through and he did something. I mean, it was one of the hardest jobs. But the good thing is I always tell people I had all these crazy jobs growing up, but none of them have been much harder than that. And as I continue to, it's like everything seemed easy after when you start there.
Sure.
And again, I remember about halfway through the summer, I spent my money on getting a trailer for my 4-wheeler, and I put all the gear and the cast cans and the new thread and everything else back on the trailer. So then I was able to move a little bit faster through it and a little bit more comfortably instead of walking around.
Yeah.
So.
You got any favorite podcasts you like to share, or anybody you're passionate about listening to?
No.
Other than the C-Suite show.
Right. I was about to say, is this where I'm supposed to plug? You said I was supposed to plug it at least twice during this time.
You can't listen to it since it hasn't been published yet.
Right. No, not really. I jump around a lot, and I take a lot of recommendations from people. And obviously, I try not to just stay focused on real estate and banking and the environment. I kind of jump out and hear everything from health and sports and wellness and some religious ones, and you name it. And I really don't have any that I'm routine to.
Got it. Tell me what your Spotify playlist looks like.
It's a lot of country. It's kind of a mix. Love like a Texas country. Love a Ryan Bingham. Love a Chris Stapleton too. Some of those, but the old Texas country stuff. The Pat Green. We talked about Robert Earl Keen the other day or earlier today. It's anything Texas country. Wade Bowen. We grew up in Lubbock when that was West 84 and those days, and so anything Texas country I'm a fan of.
That's great. If you could have coffee with one historical or famous person, who would it be?
These are tough. Man, these are really tough. This is another one of those that I know I'm going to answer, and then later on I'm going to be like, oh man, what was I thinking? There's so much. There's one more better than that.
There's no wrong answers here.
It's got to be. I'm a big sports fan, so it's got to be something related to sports.
Okay.
I mean that's kind of a light one, but I'd love to sit down with a Michael Jordan or somebody even a Tiger Woods, somebody at that level that just took what they did to a different level, because that's not about, hey, I'm just, I'm more talented physically than you. It's in their brain, and to really sit down and hear what they're about. Shoot, maybe it's a Scotty Scheffler these days, right?
Yeah,
maybe he's the next one, but someone that just, they're looking at it differently, right? Their mindset, their preparation, a Kobe Bryant, someone like that. Yeah. I just think that it would just be a really interesting time to visit. So.
For sure. If you could live anywhere else in the world, where would it be?
Italy.
Really? A specific place? You got a spot in mind?
I mean, most people will tell you when you go to Italy, it's like, go spend a day or two in Rome, like go see the sights, but then go to some, they'll tell you whatever their favorite
Lake
beautiful
Como
part.
Right.
But I mean, I could live in Rome in a heartbeat. I mean, I think Rome is one of the coolest cities in the world. I certainly no complaints going to the Amalfi Coast or Lake Como or somewhere else like that. But Rome is a pretty special. It's a pretty special place.
Favorite place in Dallas? That could be a restaurant. That could be just a spot. I mean, just where.
It's got to be Muchachos, right? It's my favorite, and I know it's there's a ton of great restaurants and there's a ton of great spots, but I just ever since they opened, I'm a creature of habit, and when I find a place that I love the food, love the people, I have a lot of friends that are always there. It just feels like second home. I think it's because it's in between my house and the office, so it's a natural spot. But I would say I'm either there or at Royal Oaks quite a bit. Yeah, those are my two places we spend quite a bit of time.
Those are two great places.
Yeah.
And speaking of Royal Oaks, Masters champion Scotty Scheffler, right? I mean,
it's
home
pretty
course,
unbelievable. Yeah.
And his teacher,
Randy Smith.
Yeah, Randy Smith. Wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, it's such an unbelievable run, and to see how he is, and in the media, and how he is out in the public, and how he is still, around Dallas. I mean, it's really, I saw someone post something the other day that said, if you're going to tell your kids, hey, here's point to a role model, right, for them to try to emulate. Like, I mean, he's got to be on the top of your list.
No doubt about it. I mean, just what he stands for and how he's open about, his belief in Christ and how important that is to him. I mean, that's great to see in today's world.
It's pretty impressive.
So we're going to close, Chris. I love talking about like making an impact on others and helping others. And so I'd love for you to share, I'm sure you're involved with some sort of charities, but are there any that are really special to your heart or things that you're passionate about in that sector?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably one of the biggest ones over the years, and my uncle was involved in it and started it. Actually, was the Lone Star Paralysis Foundation down in Austin.
Wow.
He played pro football for a long time in his career and had a spinal cord injury. Luckily, wasn't a paralysis injury, but did have an injury to end his career.
Yep.
Fully recovered from that, but that put him into a world of really research. Not just fundraising, right? They actually have a research center around paralysis.
Yeah.
We've got a really neat picture in our conference room that I think we've even got some stuff in the BBG website that'll show it if anyone's interested. But it's a tree that's called I had them paint the picture of a tree of 40 fruits. It's a tree that this scientist had created that blooms a lot of different fruits all at one point. But it's a symbol of something in our kind of business culture. But more importantly, Jared Dutton, who is a big fan and really a friend of the Lone Star Paralysis Foundation. He is he's paralyzed from the neck down from a swimming accident, and he's a painter. And if you saw the details on this, he paints with his mouth.
Wow.
And it is the most unbelievable. When you look at this painting, and I tell you that this guy painted with his mouth, and he stands for, his life motto now is, I'm going to paint my way out of this chair. He does things through this charity and through the Research and Spine Center. And so we've been, personally, obviously as a family, we're pretty committed and to that cause, and we've done a lot. But they do a neat, golf tournament and a comedy show. Bill Engvall is also a partner. For 30 years putting this thing on. They do a lot of neat events if anyone's ever interested, but they do a comedy show where they'll come down there and bring in 5, 6, 7 up and coming, I'll call them no names because no one's heard of them yet.
Yeah.
But you'll hear about them shortly. Like they are the next group of comedians that do about a 10-minute skit. It's a pretty cool thing. But that's where we try to, the Lone Star Paralysis Foundation is a really neat and very impactful. There's each year you'll see a story where somebody will, roll up in a wheelchair and stand up, and they'll stand up, and because of the work that was done through the, really global research center they have down there. So
that's incredible. We'll link that in the show comments. How can listeners find you? And if you would say, tell us the website for BBG.
Yeah, it's bbgres.com. So it's BBG Real Estate Services, basically abbreviated. And that's the website. My information's on there, and I'm not as active as you are on LinkedIn, but I'm active on there.
Pretty active.
So I try to be.
Yeah, man. No, it's great. Well, buddy, I appreciate you taking the time today to come chat about a little commercial real estate and life today. This was fun.
No, thanks for having me. This is great.
We'll have to do it again.
The time. Absolutely.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, thanks.
Have a good one, man.
All right.